So this is part 3 of an ongoing monologue and commentary on a discussion thread titled Improving Game Design on the Miniatures page. So basically this discussion is about agreement or disagreement with this original post, which is really just a excerpt from something larger, a larger post, I guess, but it has to do with the basic thesis of our war games today tending too far towards simply toy gaming, and should war games be moving in the opposite direction towards better use and more use of modern design techniques. Okay. At this point, well, first of all, while the execution of this monologue / commentary may not be exactly what I was after, overall, this is working out as far as using this discussion thread as a handrail to talk about various questions, issues, topics in wargaming and wargame design in particular. I spend a lot of my time in the hobby in and around game design discussions, and yeah. I should say this is a good time, I think. If there's ever a good time to throw out some background ideas I have, perspectives I have, biases I have, so on and so forth. It's probably a good time to say that what propels a lot of my time in the hobby is an underlying desire to see conflict gaming moved maybe to a more constructive conceptual footing, is maybe one way of putting it. Now, I will say up front, there are many of those who will say, why? Why do that? Why even attempt to do that? Why even want to do that? I am completely ready to say up front, what I'm after, which I'm about to explain, is not required. It's what I'm talking about is no more moving wargaming, conflict gaming onto a more firmer conceptual footing, is really more along the lines of can it be done? And if it can be done, I think that some worth could be gotten from it. Okay, so what am I talking about? I'm going to use, by way of pure analogy, I'm going to use the concept of art criticism. I should point out that my undergraduate education was a firmly and actually very traditional I'm sorry, yeah, that's wrong. The first half of my undergraduate education, the first half was actually a very traditional, straightforward Western liberal education, from Aristotle to aesthetics and rhetoric. Okay, second half of my undergraduate education was actually like, it's kind of funny, I never thought about it this way, but it was the second half of my undergraduate education was actually the exact opposite. I kind of moved way off to the extreme other side, and the second half of my undergraduate education was an extremely contemporary, alternative, liberal education. So basically, the second half of my undergraduate education was founded in attacks and critiques of the traditional canon and Western knowledge and Western worldview, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, but let's talk about. So my point is, I had to, I studied a little bit art criticism only because it was mandatory in my undergraduate education. I'm not sure it's very mandatory anymore these days, but it was mandatory for me. I took it. I had to take it. I don't know. I found it interesting enough, but it was mandatory. Okay. So, but I do think back to man, so many years ago, and I do think about art criticism as I've actually had. Maybe that's why it was made mandatory, because I found myself. From time to time through the years, thinking back to that education right there with art criticism. But anyways, I want to use art criticism as an analogy to game criticism, war game criticism. So we're talking about art criticism, and art criticism is, and these are my words, but art criticism is a structured and formalized way of approaching and appreciating and finding meaning in and drawing meaningful comparisons between works of art. Generally, I know my art criticism was the physical arts. Yes, the physical arts. And now, I'm sure lots of people have asked, why that? I should point out that art criticism is not itself like a foundational discipline. It basically you wouldn't have art criticism if you didn't have the more fundamental disciplines of aesthetics and basically art theory. So, by way of analogy, I'm thinking, if there is anything like, if there is something called game theory, and frankly there is, but game theory is game theory, just like art theory. Art theory is not art criticism. Art criticism builds on art theory, and aesthetics. So if we go to, again, only by way of analogy, if we talk about game criticism, war game criticism, it builds on simulation, the disciplines of simulation, game design, game theory. It builds on those. And again, it's one of those things where I don't see why it can't be done. I simply don't see why it can't be done. And the ultimate benefit, which I'm not really, I'm not going to pretend that I'm 100% clear on this, because we're nowhere near what I'm talking about. But the idea would be that we would all be able to have more constructive and meaningful discussions about war games, in exactly the same way that art criticism allows people, many different people from totally different backgrounds, perspectives, whatever, to meaningfully talk about the merits and faults of a piece of art. So finding merits and faults. Don't key too much into the word faults. It's not meant to be a moral judgmental concept here, but still, we're talking about let's say merits and shortcomings of a war game, right? If a war game is if a war game for a Civil War battle is completely missing some general's division, as known from the historical record, that's a shortcoming of the game. That is just something that game criticism, war game criticism, like art criticism, can arrive at, and people can agree on. And it doesn't have anything to do, that in and of itself doesn't have anything to do with, liking or not liking in a game, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so, interesting idea. It is in the back of my mind. It is there. We're way, and I say we're way far from what I'm talking about, because we are still a hobby. And if we're going to stay a hobby, that's fine. We probably won't get to what I'm talking about. Now here's I should point out that I think that we can get to what I'm talking. We can develop something called war game criticism, and benefit from it without destroying the hobby, without sucking the fun out of it. Of course, some people will never be convinced of what I'm saying. That's why I'm saying it with a bit of a flair there. Some will simply never be convinced. Some people will simply never be convinced. And I'm about to show you in this next post. Okay, let's pick up with McKinstry again. I think the term hobby war games is quite descriptive. After all is said and done, it will never be more than toy soldiers. Again, an idea that just comes up again and again and again. Now just think, if we're talking about art criticism and the physical arts, to have the mentality that after all is said and done, it will never be more than plaster, referring to sculpture. We're talking about sculpture and art criticism of sculpture. The mentality, after all is said and done, it will never be more than plaster. It's like, it's true, but it's like, is that an argument? Is that at all meaningful? I guess for some people it is. After all is said and done, it will never be more than toy soldiers. Okay, I got it. Probably true. Don't know what to say. Yeah, I guess for you it's, yeah. All right, as has been said, it is a big tent hobby covering a wide expanse of rules preferences, and from the most minutiae-laden rules set to the old classic 3x5 card. I have no idea. I'm not an old classic wargamer, so I don't know what this old classic 3x5 card is that's referenced here. Something for everyone, and far be it from me or anyone else to denigrate how someone else chooses to have fun or how any set creates a feel for them. Once again, two things in this paragraph. First of all, this minutiae-laden rule set. I'm starting to, quite honestly, and this is one of the reasons why I'm recording these things now, I'm getting to the point where I think that this mythical minutiae-laden rule set is like the boogeyman. I'd really like to see this, three-headed, half dragon, half woman creature that's called the minutiae-laden rule set. It's mentioned so many times, this boogeyman, this rule set that was so impenetrable, I guess, that it scarred generations of wargamers. I'd love to see this. I really would. I'm still looking. Yeah, I'm starting to think this is a big boogeyman. It's a concept that, for whatever reason, just seems to need to be in the discussions today for some reason. And I'm starting to doubt this even exists. These so-called horrible 1970s and 1980s, when rule sets were so whatever. I say whatever because I want to take a look myself and see what all the talk is about. Second thing is, far be it for him, McKinstry, to denigrate how someone else blah 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 whatever. Who's talking about denigration? I went back and I reviewed the original post, the excerpt that's in the original post. I see nothing about denigration. And again, this is not the first time I've seen this on this one thread. People talking like somebody's denigrating someone. I don't see anybody denigrating anybody. So are these references to entirely different discussions that a lot of these posters have been part of? I entirely possible, of course, but I don't know. I just don't see how denigration is part of anything. And to go back to my art criticism analogy, to force some art critic to use art criticism to lay out the merits and shortcomings of a piece of art, is that denigrating the efforts of the artist? I suppose some people will always see that. I don't think that's always the case, and interesting. I just don't see what this denigration is referring to. Again, this may be referring to some other internal knowledge understood by a lot of posters in this thread. I've already come across evidence that these, I'm not talking facetiously. I know that I've already come across evidence that some posters are referring to other posters in a kind of meta discussion sense, where they are queuing off of repeated discussions. I got that. It doesn't help me, because I'm just going to take these threads at face value. So that's not going to help me. All I know is there is no denigration at all in the original excerpt, in the post. And so far, up to this point, I don't see anybody denigrating anybody. Okay, so that said, I do think we delude ourselves if we ever think we can leave the game concept entirely and approach true simulation. This is a wonderful, wonderful example of it's an empty argument. Show me who is claiming that they're going to leave the game concept entirely and approach true simulation. I don't know. This is setting up a false premise here, I guess. Suggesting a false premise, suggesting that maybe not a false premise, suggesting an unsubstantiated premise, I guess. Approximation to match plausible outcomes and processes is and has been many times achieved within a fun game. It may be just me, but I do not believe true simulation can even be achieved as a game, but that may be just my scars. Yeah, I knew there was a reference to this. Let's do this. It may be just me, but I do not believe true simulation can even be achieved as a game, but that may be just my scars from playing modern naval games in the 1980s, with turns measured in seconds, ships that moved barely their own length, and multiple die rolls for each and every EW interaction. It may have been a decent simulation with plausible outcomes. It was not in any way, shape, or form fun. This is a kind of collective, and certainly collective. It's a collective, it's at least a collective narrative. It's probably even more than that, a collective, shared kind of generational experience, I guess. I don't share it. So I'm just looking at it, as a external observer. This poster is fine with explaining this, but you'll see I will show how others describe the 1970s and 80s with extreme hyperbole, explaining this same, again, collective narrative, memory, whatever, but they do it in just pure hyperbole, which doesn't help anything. All right, Rudy Nelson posts, a system needs to be reflective of the era and command level being covered, even if there may be perceived flaws. Again, the reference to a command level, maybe not. As designers and even rule player lawyers who like to check all systems tend to overlook a key element of the design system. Not all input factors can be controlled by the designer. A player may alter how a system reacts when played by making poor command decisions. This may happen in a number of ways. Okay, so what is he getting at? So how complicated and restrictive does the designer make certain guidelines to force a player to do or react in certain ways? Interesting question. Major B, quoting, perhaps someday someone will succeed in making a game that perfectly reflects historical tactics and decision making, etc., etc. Okay, so he responds, seems the military, okay, may have started using Matrix games, okay. I don't think, McKinstry, I don't think that is the same, yeah. Weasel posts, a good game in my view is one that picks out one or two factors, I agree with this, one or two factors to really nail down while the rest is functional enough. I generally agree with that. Uses Crossfire as an example. Crossfire is a fantastic turn sequence, while the combat is functional and the tank rules are a common course of discontent, for example. But when people talk about why Crossfire is good, they aren't talking about tanks. They're talking about how it emphasizes initiative and risk-taking. That's Crossfire's thing, so to speak. I really agree with this. This again reminds me of art criticism. Some games have a thing that isn't what you want in a game, while others will match it perfectly. Sometimes the thing is just putting a lot of toys on the table. Yeah. Mexican Jack Squint. I note that McLaddy continues. Okay, his tedious campaign. I'm not going to read it, but Mexican Jack Squint is making the argument that McLaddy just has an ongoing campaign against Sam Mustafa. I don't know. I don't know one way or the other. Yes, that Phil. Quotes the earlier part about the term hobby war games. After all said and done, never be more than toy soldiers. Or as Brigadier Peter Young put it in the excellent introduction to Charge, the amateur war game, which he contrasts with the professional war game, which is what soldiers, including those Prussian generals, do. I prefer amateur because for me wargaming is too tightly meshed to my work as a military historian and battlefield trustee to be entirely a hobby, but by and large we mean the same thing. Okay. Yeah. Bob the Temple Builder, the Matrix games. Okay, I'm not gonna. Matrix games, got it. Daler 240D, disagree. It is a fallacious and pretentious. So, disagrees with the idea put forth in the original excerpt, in the original post. It is a fallacious and pretentious false dichotomy. The thesis is also completely lacking in defining any of its terms, systems, modeling, and design techniques, and the way warfare works as a system. I actually agree with this. This sounds like typical social scientist jargon and is further evidence of the disconnect certain people have with telling the difference between the quantifiable and the sliding scale towards the ineffable. I don't know. Daler 240D might have some interesting things to say here on this. This sounds like the start of a rant that I'm not even interested in. Auto at Home. Dear Daler 240D, agree with your disagreement. Wargame design for private gaming for pleasure is like dialectical materialism of the certain. All right, this is once you've mastered you know it all, the rest is rubbish. All entities seek to create an insider jargon so as to convince the uninitiated there's something scientific, arcane, and holy about what they're doing. This is just a knee-jerk reaction against something that's labeled socialist and deconstructionist and postmodern, whatever. You, Daler, are correct. They dare not define these items in any but even more arcane and obscurantist language. Again, there may be important ideas here, but it's kind of hidden under apparent, almost anger. I don't know, whatever. Weasel, but the toying of soldiers is very important. Okay, war artisan. True simulation and the training of military personnel were never reasonable goals for hobby wargame design. Not sure I agree with that. Historical wargame design can and should be informed by scholarship and not entirely scholarly work. They are and will always remain more art than science. Still, they can inform and enlighten. I have seen it happen, and I completely disregard the arguments of those who claim it is impossible. Yeah, okay. Granted. Attempting to impose objective standards and parameters on wargame design makes no more sense than doing so for a historical novel, historical painting, or historical movie. Okay. Again, what pops into my mind is the art criticism analogy. Just take out the word objective. Can you impose standards and parameters? While there are certainly aspects of these things that can be subjected to objective analysis, like execution or presentation, or how far the creator departs from what we know of history and telling a story, yeah, these are really important things. That's part of the analysis. Analysis is another word that will sometimes crop up in the definition of criticism in general, whether it's art criticism, to use my example that I already talked about, whether it's literary criticism, film criticism. Yes, analysis is there. In the end, all that matters is how their effectiveness is judged by their intended audience. Again, I'm not sure that that's all that matters. That's certainly there, certainly important. Note the very deliberate use of the word intended. How work is received by those for whom it was not intended is beyond irrelevant. I don't know about that. The call for professionalism embodied in the original Post quote can't really be extended beyond the designer's honesty. That is, how closely his work conforms to his purpose, whether explicitly stated or merely implied. End users should be wary of the work of any designer who, for example, claims that it is simple or fast play but runs to 100 plus pages, or one who chooses a historical subject but then includes elements which are blatantly incorrect. Okay. And these are interesting cautions, but if you have specific examples, Garth in the Park. One who chooses historical, again, Garth in the Park, grabs onto that last piece, like I did. One who chooses a historical subject, but then includes blah, 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 blatantly incorrect. Garth in the Park responds, but how often does that really happen? That's what I was wondering. I mean, it's not as if people have games about Caesar with Panther tanks and helicopters. Most of the time, this is splitting hair stuff, like somebody who is mad that the game doesn't differentiate between the 3.2-inch 1854 model Snodgrass cannon and the 3.4-inch 1858 model rifled Snodgrass. For one gamer, neglecting that sort of detail is blatantly incorrect. For another, and obviously for the designer, it doesn't matter at all. Who is right? What's the objective, correct, or historical way to do it? These are matters of taste and preference, not hard science. Again, it's not an either or, hard science on the one hand and taste and preference on the other. I will say that there are I've already been convinced that there in fact is legitimate soft science. I definitely went through a period of doubting that, but I'm now on the side of accepting that there is something legitimate referred to as that we can refer to as soft science. So it's not hard science or taste and preference. All right, War Artisan. No, Garth, it's not all a matter of taste. I wasn't referring to nitpicky differences of opinion about the performance of roughly equivalent weapons or varying preferences of gamers about what a design should or should not include. These are indeed matters of opinion. Without going through a pile of rulebooks and piling a list of examples, I can think of a couple recent Age of Sail rules. So he's going to talk about some recent Age of Sail rule sets that allow ships to sail right into the wind and that apparently give, I don't know, egregiously incorrect values of attack and defense, I guess. No, I'm summarizing this because it's going to go on here. Okay. What it comes down to for him is basically if it's a fictional design, that's fine. But if there's any claim to representing historical events, then they're basically unacceptable errors, I guess. Garth in the Park comes back, quoting the part about the first-rate ships being given damage capabilities only 3 times that of ships with 1/5 and blah, 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 blah. Funny how we get into some naval game minutia real quick. All right, so Garth in the Park responds, or perhaps he's using damage capabilities in a way that's different from what you're used to. Historical sailing ships didn't have a single numerical rating for damage. Actual damage was a complex thing that involved many factors, chance, types of weapons hitting the ship, locations of those hits, and so on. Giving a damage rating is itself a total fiction. They probably arrived at the numbers they used due to a lot of playtesting and experimenting with what worked and what didn't. I've seen a lot of people scoff at games after a quick look at some of their charts or numbers and judge them without playing them. I guess that is done more than we would like, right? A lot of guys were mad at Flames of War for their sliding scale weapons ranges. Okay, if you take them literally, then a 105mm howitzer has a bombardment range that is about 5 times the range of an infantryman's rifle, which is absurd. But for the tens of thousands of people who played and loved the game, that didn't matter, okay? These are indeed matters of taste and opinion. Again, I'm not sure that that's the correct way to put it. The game design matters are not a matter of taste opinion. Obviously whether a gamer, or I should say, obviously how a gamer responds to those game elements may be a matter of taste and opinion on the gamer's part. But no, their part in the rule set is not a matter of taste and opinion. I don't think so. Yeah. All right. And it is a valid question. Do you really think that the Flames of War artillery ranges were created either due to ignorance of actual weapons ranges or due to deliberate dishonesty? I think that's a valid question. McLaddy. Tony, thank you for your responses. There is a lot you write that I agree with. For instance, Sam Mustafa has done a number of things worthy of respect. Okay. McLaddy says he was not criticizing Blucher. I haven't played Blucher, so I have no feelings about it one way or the other. Okay. But he has friends who enjoy the rule set. I reiterated Sam's philosophy of game design, not to criticize it, but for one reason, and one reason only, to point out you ascribed qualities to Blucher in regards to depth and portraying historical tactics that Sam has been quite forthright insisting aren't possible with wargame design. It's funny that, okay, I won't talk too soon on that. Both you and Sam are welcome to your opinions, but if we are discussing how to design wargames, you have to admit there is a serious disconnect here. Other gamers on TMP have stated similar kinds of things. For instance, some see Blucher as a better simulation than some other wargame, when the designer himself states categorically wargames can't be simulations. That's an interesting idea. I mean, it is interesting. Yeah, that's about all I can say. A gamer or game designer makes certain statements about game design, which presumably includes their own game, whereas players of that game make claims about the game which seem to contradict the designer's own statements. I'm not sure any of this is... I mean, I think this can all happen at the same time. I'm not sure what we can definitively say about it, but let's go on. So I'm praising a car for being a better than average self-driving vehicle, and then the designer himself says that green such car is not possible, so not desirable. I'm not sure about that example. Yeah. Certainly this kind of player versus designer design disconnect isn't unique to Blucher. Yes, that's true. That was one example. That was one example you provided of simple and deep. Okay. The reverse of this disconnect is just as common. Yeah. We all play war games for fun, duh. And even from a cursory look at the TMP threads, gamers seek different kinds of fun from the same war game experience. Yes. All to the good and self-evident. Which means that war games can be and are designed for different reasons and target different kinds of fun. Yes. Definitely different kinds of fun, different ways that game designers try to hit that type of fun. I play war games that I enjoy and avoid those I don't. Imagine that's how most wargamers choose what to play. But we are talking war game design. In other words, asking how to create war games that gamers, myself and others, enjoy. How does the game system and mechanics create the immersion you've experienced, and what makes a game succeed in modeling something of war? Yeah. generally a good question. McLady, yeah, okay. So I'm not going to tell you. So he responds to the earlier charge that he has some, I don't know, vendetta, some obsession with criticizing Sam Mustafa. Yeah, don't need to. Yeah, that's not really on track with this discussion. War artisan. Okay, so he's referring to the earlier idea and the earlier quote about perhaps the designers are using damage capabilities in a way different than that player was seeing. So War Artisan comes back and say, actually, they did. That is, War Artisan is saying, actually, historically, sailing ships did have a single numerical rating for damage. The professionals that spent their careers in sailing men of war universally accepted. Man, every time, arguments that have every, universally, okay. Universally, which is hard to believe, accepted the weight of a ship's broadside as a meaningful measure of its ability to damage an opponent. By the way, it's not unbelievable that this was universally accepted. It's just the term universally accepted is going to be so hard to definitively, hammer down and get a grasp on. But okay. All right. A designer who ignores this is creating a game, but it is not a historical wargame. Okay. Okay. Seems a little overboard. But okay, I'm not sure what your point was in asserting the broad acceptance of Flames of War among people to whom its anti-historical absurdities don't matter. I'm not sure they're anti-historical absurdities. How about ahistorical aspects? I'm not defending Flames of War, obviously. But I will note how, as this discussion continues, I don't know if it's more and more, but stuff keeps creeping in, these extreme claims, hyperbole, false arguments, straw man arguments. Yeah, that is what I will key in on. Game's popularity has nothing to do with its conformity to the musical record. Got it. Again, who's disagreeing with that? In any case, Flames of War is not a good example of the type of game to which I was referring, since its designers purposefully distorted history in order to produce a playable game that happens to use historical miniatures as playing pieces. Okay, that is neither ignorant nor dishonest, but it is, in my opinion, rather frivolous and disrespectful. Oh, okay. So it's not ignorant or dishonest, but it's frivolous and disrespectful. Again, it's an interesting idea. Seems a little extreme. Unlike those tens of thousands, the history matters to me, and designers who disrespect the history will get no respect from me. Okay. Ultimately, whether a game is enjoyable is indeed a matter of opinion. Whether a sailing ship can move directly into the wind is not a matter of opinion, and I cannot enjoy a game which allows it. Okay. Dalo 240D, McLady respectfully saying things like this. Comes across quite condescending. I don't think that came across as condescending at all. But, again, it's not really on topic. McLady responds to that. Again, it's not, too far off topic. McLady, in the end, referring to the quote, in the end, it depends on what the goal of miniature wargaming, what the goal is of miniature wargaming. So McLady responds, Phil, I meant to respond earlier. Okay, I agree. Although I don't think you can say miniature wargaming as a hobby has a single goal anymore, and you can say there is one kind of fun for every gamer. Yeah. Miniature wargaming as a medium has its limits and constraints, as do all wargaming mediums, McLady writes, including board and computer games. Yes. The trick is to know the strengths and weaknesses of each medium in your design goals. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. Know the strengths and weaknesses of your medium that you're partaking of, and if you're a designer, know your design goals. And actually, as a user of war games, you may be able to enhance your enjoyment of the war games if you, at some point, give some attention to what the designer's design goals were, if those are able to be identified. All right. Actually, the military still uses toy soldiers to war game with a number of venues. Sand tables and miniatures are still in use. Yes. In fact, the Rand Corporation just noted upsurge in manual wargaming, blah, blah, blah. I will say absolutely McGladdy is, McGladdy doesn't know what I was doing as a platoon leader or company commander, but I'm glad that he points this out, because there is nothing, the use of miniatures, strictly speaking, in the military will probably always be there. Whether they look like war games that you're familiar with or not is debatable, but sand tables and miniatures will always be there, I think. I say always be there because well, in one way or another, it's kind of always been there. And while the different mediums may change, the different ways of, well, I'll back up. I'll back up. For the entire time that I've been in the Army, the use of sand table exercises, miniatures, terrain models, have been a part of the infantry, the part of our doctrine in the U.S. Army. So maybe I shouldn't have even gone that far for what we're talking about here. Yeah, I'm sure this is too interesting. Yeah. Responding to the earlier quote, whether that game is a close mimicry of an actual battle is of lesser importance. McGladdy's writing, to whom? Certainly there are any number of gamers that feel that way, no problem, but I know there are any number that wouldn't agree with you for a variety of reasons. That's very reasonable. That's a very reasonable response. It is very important to some people and of no importance to others, with every opinion in between. Yes, I don't think you can say that either as a general view or game design conclusion for the hobby. Okay. Our games are inspired by military history, but they are not military history, quote unquote. McGladdy is going to respond. Many game designers claim to have presented military history accurately, in that they are presenting a historical narrative. That history is being modeled. So there are hobby games whose goal is to model that history in some way. That is more than simply being inspired, whatever that means in game design terms, regardless of how important or possible that goal is. All right. Bottom line is, I think McGladdy would probably be of the mind that war games and game design can be approached in a disciplined way that takes out, let me boil it down. I think McGladdy, and I would hope that he's not the only one, is of the general mindset that we can approach game design and war games in a way that is more consistent, disciplined, and logical and reasonable, such that we avoid the limp fish, dead fish, limp wrist generalization that it's all about each individual's taste and feel and sense of feel of a game. Yeah. I'll end here.